The winter solstice and end of the year are times that are celebrated all throughout the world in many different forms, with holidays that have evolved throughout time and cultures. And one family tree that has likely experienced a good variety of these different holidays is the Joestar family, and I thought it would be fun, given the season and all, to go through and examine each main JoJo and discuss what holiday that they would be celebrating this time of year. So there are 8 major JoJos throughout the whole of JoJo's Bizarre Adventures, 8 different parts, each of them coming from different cultures or time periods, so their views on the world could be rather different, especially since some traditions have evolved as well over time. Though before we discuss what JoJo is celebrating which holiday, we should first understand why we celebrate around this time of the year to begin with. So, all around the world, many different cultures have, in one way or another, invented their own form of celebration for the end of the year, specifically around the winter solstice, or the time in which the Earth's pole is at its maximum tilt away from the sun, creating the shortest day and longest night. Historians assume that the celebration of the solstice was created in order to bring communities together, as winter would tend to bring massive famines, so celebrations, in the form of some large feast, would keep communities healthy. But it also kept people safe during what is also the most dangerous night of the year, as it is the longest night. One of the original celebrations of this nature went on to influence many others just like it, and that is the Germanic festival of Yuletide, which introduced a couple of concepts, such as the massive family feast, the setting up of offerings in some way, and of course, gift giving. These traditions then evolved and were adopted into the holidays we know now, though of course there were holidays that originated unrelated to Yuletide as well. Along with this, the celebration of certain holidays as time continued on became less and less religious in tradition, and more about the holiday time celebration. So, while some characters might celebrate Christmas, it doesn't directly mean that they are religious, though the first main focus of this, and the first main Joestar will be covering, likely was, given his location and English origin, this of course being Jonathan Joestar. Jonathan Joestar is an Englishman born in 1868 and lived to around 1889, meaning that he had roughly 21 years to celebrate some form of holiday, and given that he grew up wealthy and in the Victorian era, Jonathan likely celebrated the 1800s traditional Christmas, where the upper class or wealthy in a community were expected to give gifts to the less fortunate in the same community, though it's very possible that Jonathan also had a Santa Claus figure as well, known as Father Christmas, whose visual depictions tended to draw direct influence from Charles Dickens's classic A Christmas Carol's Ghost of Christmas Present. Along with this, Jonathan was also living through the beginnings of the Grand Christmas Revival, which sprung the holiday into the full-on mainstream for future generations. Which leads me to Jonathan's grandson and next major JoJo, Joseph Joestar, who was born in 1920 and has no confirmed date of death, meaning that he's seen a whole shitload of holidays actually, though it's likely that he's celebrating Christmas predominantly as well, just like his grandfather. But unlike his grandfather, Joseph would firsthand experience the glorification of Christmas, along with experiencing the meteoric rise to popularity that was Coca-Cola's own Santa design, which became one of the most iconic looks for the jolly old fella that we know today. He would also experience the adaptation of pagan traditions being added more predominantly into Christmas celebrations as well, with the Puritan restrictions that Jonathan might have experienced being stamped out. So to put it in more simpler terms, Joseph experiences a Christmas much closer to the Christmas that we know today, especially since that he lives to at least 2010. He also married Susie Q, who is an Italian servant class woman who likely had some Christmas traditions hammered into her that she then hammered into Joseph. And to round out this Christmas trifecta, we have Joseph's grandson, Jotaro Kujo, who is the first big deviation in the Joestar bloodline, being a Japanese-American who lived from 1970 to 2012. Jotaro also grew up predominantly in a post-World War II Japan, meaning a lot of his culture was heavily influenced by Western culture already, and with an American mother, it's very likely that Jotaro would have likely celebrated a form of Christmas, even though the holiday itself wasn't entirely huge in his country of birth, being only a part of the general winter holiday, which starts around the 23rd, and on top of that, Christmas also tends to fall into more of a wintry Valentine's Day status in Japan, rather than some sort of major holiday, being more romantic to most. Though, given his age, Jotaro was the subject to one marketing tactic that blew up in Japan specifically for Japanese Christmas, this being Kentucky Fried Chicken's push in Japanese markets to be the holiday food item of interest. This marketing stunt was called Kentucky for Christmas, and it launched launched in 1974, and with that, it caught on like a wildfire, given that the country at the time had no real traditions for Christmas. So like how Joseph got to experience the rise of Coke Santa, Jotaro got to experience the rise of the Colonel in the East. Though he was partly American, and later moved to that country to pursue an education, meaning at some point, it's very possible that Jotaro would end up celebrating at least some adaptation of an American Christmas, especially later in his life. But he isn't the only Japanese JoJo, as he has a bastard uncle named Josuke Higashikata as well. Josuke is a very interesting case, being the first fully Japanese JoJo, never knowing his father or the wealthy businessman that he was in America, which means he likely celebrated the more standard Japanese holiday, this being the winter holiday season, which tended to be more about New Year's than Christmas per se, with one big deal being Hatsumoda, or the first shrine visit, where people would flock to their local shrine to pay it the first visit of the new year and tend to make a wish on that visit. Along with this, given that Josuke was born in 1983, he also likely fell into the tradition of the KFC for Christmas, but this was likely less influenced by marketers and more directly influenced by his peers or family. And given how Araki sort of left Moriocho untouched, I assume Josuke continues to celebrate these traditional Japanese holidays for the rest of his life. Though someone who is probably close to the more traditional Christmas is our next JoJo, the Italian gang star, Giorno Giovanna. Giorno, being mostly Italian raised, likely had some heavy holiday traditions instilled into him by his family when he was around his family. And he of all most definitely celebrates Christmas, especially given its religious origins and figures like Santa Claus originating from things like Saint Nicholas, the Christian bishop of Greek descent whose main temple resides in Bari, Italy. Giorno is also pretty modern by his peer standards, being born in 1985, so even though his Christmas is probably more rooted in tradition, it's likely not similar to the same Puritan-driven Christmas that his father celebrated, at least assuming that Dio celebrated Christmas. Also, Giorno is the only JoJo we've seen actually wear like a Christmas outfit officially, so basically he's the Santa of JoJo if you ask me. Though if we move on back to America, we get to someone who is a bit of a toss-up. Jolene Kujo, the daughter of Jotaro. She's a strange case because, well, it's easy to say that she was raised in America, so it's likely that she celebrated America's biggest holiday, Christmas. It's hard to say what kind of Christmas she celebrated exactly, as there might have been a lot of Japanese traditions sprinkled into it. Funny enough, it likely comes mostly from her mother's side than her father's side, as Jotaro was partly absent from Jolene's life. But, going off his stated taste in women in part 3, it's likely that Jotaro would have married someone with traditional Japanese values in America. So, that in part might have influenced the type of Christmases that Jolene gets to celebrate, if she even got to celebrate Christmas at all. Though, in the transition into the new universe, Jolene became Irene, and given her family life was much better there, it's likely that she, compared to her original universe Jolene, had more luxurious Christmas parties, given her grandfather is one of the richest men in all of America, and was still kicking it at that time. But with the Ireneverse, it's always possible that Anarchist, her husband-to-be, was from some other tradition or religion, so it's very possible that they could be celebrating one kick-ass Hanukkah party as well. But speaking of alternate universes, in a far-off one unrelated to the Ireneverse exists our next JoJo, Johnny Joestar of the Steel Ball Run universe. Johnny is an even weirder case than Jolene, as while he grew up in a similar time period to Jonathan in the base universe, Johnny's holiday traditions likely ended up being a bit different, likely celebrating the early Christmas traditions in America, but post the Steel Ball Run race, Johnny moved from his home in America to Japan with his wife, Rina Higashikata. And it's here that he lived in pre-World War II Japan, let alone pre-World War I. So it was a Japan mostly devoid of a lot of the Western influences we know today, meaning that the winter holiday is the closest celebration that he has to his traditional Christmas. Though, given how Johnny grew up and the family he was around for those Christmas holidays, I don't think he cared too much. But with that all said, he did literally meet Mormon Jesus during his cross-country race, so who knows how he feels about holidays anymore. He did get to experience a brand new holiday in November, that being Emperor's Day, given that he moved to Japan during the Meiji era, which would mean that he would celebrate the Emperor's birthday on November 3rd. But he didn't celebrate it for long. Which leaves us with our last but not least JoJo, Josuke Higashikata, or lovingly referred to as Gappy. And if you think Johnny and Jolene were a mess, then god do I have something for you. So Gappy is the fusion of Yoshikage Kira and Josefumi Kujo. And he was given the name Josuke Higashikata by the person who found him and the family that adopted him. He doesn't actually have really much tradition at all. He's barely a year old, I believe. And because of his recent creation, Gappy, so far in the story of JoJolion, hasn't actually had a chance to celebrate any holidays at all. Sure, Yoshikage Kira and Josefumi Kujo likely celebrated their own holidays, though, given Josefumi's own parents, I doubt that they were very good holidays. Gappy himself hasn't, though it is likely that, much like Josuke of the original universe, Gappy would be celebrating the winter holiday season of Japan. But obviously he won't be taking part in any of that KFC tradition, because he loves french fries and not fried chicken. Also, it's very possible that he would be celebrating Christmas as well with Yasuo, who he loves deeply, so deeply. He cares. So much. They're in love. Well, with that all said and done, I really hope you enjoyed my little holiday special. And when I started this project, I actually didn't expect there to be so many characters who would realistically be Christmas celebrators. But I guess Araki has always been hugely fascinated in Western culture growing up, so it would make sense that a lot of the characters that he tends to base from Western part of the world to more realistically celebrate the more popular holiday in those areas. Now, before this video comes completely to a close, I want to say that I wish you all a Merry Christmas or a Happy Holiday to whatever one you may celebrate. And I hope next year is a better year to come, because I know it's not a stretch to say that this year has been rough for a lot of people. I think I'm safe in saying that I hope next year is better in any light. I love you all, and thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed this video and want to help support me and more videos like it in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/ManyNotTheBadGuy. Every little bit helps support this channel and keeps it flowing as efficiently as it does. And if you want something to spend your holiday money on, well, feel free to pick up a copy of Shimoneta, A Boring World Where the Concept of Dirty Jokes Doesn't Exist at buyshimoneta.com.